I've come to believe, because I know our topic today is about reality TV, I may be watching more reality TV than scripted TV at this point. I may be one of those people. So when I go on the road, right, when I'm doing shows and I'm on the road, I hate being alone. I hate being without my wife. So if I'm in a hotel, I have the TV on, and there are channels that are just back-to-back reality shows.
Right.
I'm never watching a scripted show.
So what do you want? What's the reality show you're into?
It could be anything. It could be sometimes it's a game. Sometimes it's I've watched things that I would not watch in my home. So I'll watch a little bit of the Kardashians. I'll watch a little bit of...
Well, I would have never pegged you for a Kardashian
Well,
viewer.
I'm fascinated.
But it's all fake. It's all staged. It's all...
I understand that. I'm fascinated. I don't mean to be derogatory. I believe that these women have found real contributions to make that are making them famous and wealthy. But initially, if you said, what is the individual talent of any one of them, I'd go, I couldn't tell you. I don't know why they're on my television set. They're not terribly entertaining. They're not actresses. They're not singers. They're not dancers. They're not, so what is the talent that you would normally bring to a television show? So given that there is no obvious talent in the way we think about talent, they have built an empire on television. And it fascinates me because it wouldn't be something that I would normally have watched, but they are a phenomenon.
Can I tell you why
Millions of people are watching them, and so sometimes I put it on to go, what are we watching?
Why I think some of those shows work. My theory is reality TV, you know it's fake and you know it's staged. Everybody knows it's edited and all that. However, it's fake combined with real because it's the juxtaposition of real into fake, which is, yes, we staged this, but that reaction was real.
Yeah, and the thing I said is not scripted. It's coming out of my mouth organically. Yeah.
Even no matter what, you're seeing real reactions to fake stage stuff. Do you know which, in looking at reality shows and trying to think, we were going to talk about this, what do I watch or what don't I watch? I didn't realize that Survivor was the Les Moonves okayed Survivor because they had stuff embedded in advertising, embedded in it already. If it bombed, it made money.
Sure.
But Survivor supposedly kicked off the reality
and
brand.
Let me just tell you, my cousin Jonathan has been on it 3 times. He's been a contestant 3
Is he a star
times.
because of that? The people recognize him?
He's got big notoriety. And, and he was very good, because they swear, they're not going to give anything away. So we would have viewing parties any season he was on. And, as we were watching an episode, he couldn't tell us what was going to happen, but he could talk about anything that happened up to that point.
And what it was like.
And they kind of made him a little bit of a villain, at least the first time he was on. And there would be a thing where, he won a reward for food, and then it looks like he's just going, yum, 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 and everybody's starving, right? And they're all going, oh, you jerk off. Right? What they took out was, he went, I'm willing to, I will share
Anybody
this with
want
anybody. Anybody want to think? Because I know we're all starving. Did anybody? And they were all like, no, you want it, man, fair and square. And, he's like, you sure? And all that's out. And he said, somebody will say something and then they'll cut to a reaction by somebody else. And he goes, that statement and that reaction were 3 days apart.
So because they have to do a
They're
narrative.
building a story that doesn't exist.
Talking about reality shows, the reason we wanted to do this episode is all of a sudden we start seeing headlines in the Hollywood Reporter and all of the trade papers. Has reality TV finally taken its final bow?
Right.
The death of reality TV with ratings plummeting, what this means for the future of unscripted television. They're now ordering less episodes.
Mm-hmm.
They're bagging a lot of it. A lot of it's not happening here anymore.
Right.
And a lot of the people who worked in that industry were freelancers and are just in dire straits at this point because it looks like either reality TV is over or it's going to change. So we wanted to get an expert who could talk about it. And Emily Nussbaum, who is a Pulitzer Prize winning critic, which I got to ask about. A critic?
Yeah. No.
You're that good at criticism.
Right.
So nobody at home can even beat you.
Right.
You're,
you used a superlative no one has used.
She wrote a book about the reality television industry from beginning to now called Cue the Sun, which is from The Truman Show. The fact that Jim Carrey did not know that he was in a perpetual reality show. So we wanted to get her on. 2014, she won a National Magazine Award for the columns and commentary. 2016, won the Pulitzer. As I said, she's been with New Yorker, New York Magazine, and she has devoted a lot of time to examining reality TV. So who better to have on than her?
Really? No, really? Really? No, really? Really?
Is reality TV dead, or is it just morphing and shedding a skin, and it's going to be something completely new starting soon?
When I wrote about reality television in the book, I basically had to come up with a definition because there's all these different versions of what people consider reality TV.
Right.
And honestly, even I, when I started writing this book, had this kind of grand idea, like, I will write, a nonfiction book about the history of reality TV. I will include it all. That was impossible. And I think like a lot of people thought of it as something that went back to like Survivor or The Real World is really what I thought about it as. And then, That's Incredible and all of those shows also fit into it. And what I ended up writing about at the beginning of the book was radio, which I really didn't know that much about. And it was only once I started doing the research that I started
talk about that for a minute, because that blew me. I never even thought about that, having come from radio, that that Allen Funt actually, it was candid radio that started this genre in a way.
Yeah, it was Candid Microphone. And when he made Candid Microphone, which was this bananas, strange show that was popular but very divisive and unnerving, because it was really the first prank show. It was all the things you'd imagine for what became Candid Camera, but it was really new thing. It was actually part of a larger trend on radio that wasn't called reality radio. It was called audience participation shows. And the first time that I realized I had to write about this was I was researching Candid Microphone and Queen for a Day, which the book begins with these shows that are sort of like proto-reality TV on radio. And I found this article that was basically like, what is this disgusting trend? What is these audience participation shows where regular people are going on, they're making fools of themselves, it's destroying the industry, it's a strike breaker, and it shows that the entire country has become just a place of narcissists who want nothing but cheap attention and who want to be famous just for being themselves. And this was an article from 1947. So I was very excited because it was like literally exactly the same set of concerns that people had when Survivor came out at the turn of the century. They were talking about on radio. And so then I had to do this little like self-education in radio. But Candid Microphone, I mean, there were a lot of different shows like that. Like there were just shows that were quiz shows or shows where people would sort of be asked to embarrass themselves. But Allen Funt, who had actually made one of these shows early on and thought those shows were garbage also, he was a sneaky guy who got a portable microphone and had a dream. I mean, that's really where a lot of this came from. After reading many people's opinions of Allen Funt, I did not come away with a positive impression of him, but he really is the godfather of the entire thing, because I think you just had to have a person like that who, he was in the army running sort of army radio programs. And there was this technological change where suddenly you could have a portable microphone, and he got it in his hands. And his first thought was, I should trick my friends and tape them without their knowledge. And I should tape over the red button that shows the microphones on and, trick people into doing things. And so that really became the beginning of the whole stream of prank shows.
Did they get pushback? Did they get pushback that they were from the public, that they were mean? Because I remember when I was a little kid, Allen Funt was on, and I remember that friends of ours said, he's mean, I can't stand him, he's making people look stupid. I don't like that he does that. And then I think you pointed out that Camera, it's they changed the name of it to Smile, You're on Can. They marketed it as a smile, you're being made an asshole of, basically, and a jingle to make people feel better about the fact that they were being completely maligned and made to look foolish.
When I was writing this book, I listened to that song so many times in so many different versions that I could not get it out of my head. And honestly, it is an amazing song. It's a very catchy heirloom of propaganda.
You're elected, it's your lucky day, smile.
Right.
You've been made an ass of.
Yeah.
With at least, what is it? It says,
when you
it's fun to look at yourself as others do.
Yeah, right.
As other people do.
Yeah.
And, it's at the least, I'm sorry, I can't remember all the lyrics.
Yeah.
Apparently, I listened to it a lot of times. But
It's fun to look at yourself as other people do. It's fun to laugh at yourself as other people do. Look at yourself. Yeah, I know it's in there somewhere,
He
taking up
basically
space.
says, if you are pranked by Allen Funt, you're the luckiest person on
It's your
earth.
lucky
And
day,
if you
right.
push back on it in any way, you have no sense of humor.
Right.
Because now you're famous and you should be really
Right.
complimented. So even besides them making people sign releases for the show, this was sent the message to anybody that it was a really positive thing. But it's interesting that people that you knew said that he was mean. Because, you know, when I was growing up, I remember thinking that was this sweet show and that
Sweetest
he was
guy.
this
He would
sort
play
of
with
Wow.
kids, and he would. But yeah, I thought he
A
came
neighbor
off
of ours
very-
was
and he was
adamant.
great with kids. He was
Yeah.
great with kids. But even when it was a radio show, I mean, they actually put more stuff with kids on the show to make it feel less mean. It was meaner in a lot of ways on the radio. And when it was first on TV in the 50s, it also got a lot of pushback. I mean, a lot of people found it kind of cruel, and they made it less cruel over time in a lot of different ways. They had celebrities on it, they had kids, they made it a little bit gentler, and now people remember it very nostalgically. And sometimes when I say I wrote a book on reality TV, they're like, I miss the nice stuff like Candid Camera. I'm like, you should read the pieces people wrote about Candid Camera.
Well, and Candid Camera eventually, if I recall, he made one motion picture called "What Do You Say to a Naked Lady," where it was one gag. He kept putting naked women in like an elevator, and that was the Candid Camera. He couldn't do it on television, but he released
That
it
was
as
the
a
whole
film.
movie?
Yeah,
He
what do you call?
always wanted to do more dirty stuff on
Yeah.
the show. I mean, he was a pretty perverted guy. Like he was into tricking people, and he definitely was like in all his biographies. He writes a lot about sex, and I think that sort of kink has something to do. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
you know, a voyeuristic kind of scheme, but he really wanted to do more adult stuff than you could do on TV, for better or worse. And he wanted to make a movie that was really intense about sex. And
Yeah.
he made one. That movie, you should rewatch that movie. That is one of the weirdest movies.
It is a weird movie, even
Is it out
as a
there?
kid. Oh,
Is
you
it
can
in- you
find
can
it.
find
yeah.
it?
But I
Yeah,
saw.
it's
I
streaming
think,
online. He made another movie that I couldn't find. It's about money, I think. He wanted to
Uh-huh.
make a series of movies about all of these taboo adult subjects. And
Right.
yeah.
Well, are there Funt family members that still, like you did? We should mention, to do the book, you interviewed John Langley, who did Cops. You did Mary Alice Bunham's no longer with her, but you did her partner John Murray, who did Murray Bunham, who launched Real World. You did you do what's his name at Fox? Mike Darnell. Did you get
Oh
to
yeah,
Mike Darnell?
I talked to Mike Darnell. I talked to Mike Fleiss. I tried to. I interviewed more than 300 people for the book,
Which is
because
amazing.
one of the things the book I wanted, you know, it's not a book of criticism. It's a book of the history of where the genre came from, and it's about the creation of a workplace and a whole bunch of jobs.
So
that
is there
never
a Funt?
existed.
Is there a Funt that exists today that keeps the thing, or trying to keep it alive?
Yeah, his son does that. We fact checked the book with him, and most of the people who worked with Funt are not alive anymore. And I really tried to find people. There are records of late in the game. I found this very intense memoir by one of his main producers, and I picked it up kind of wanting to read something that somebody had to say fondly about him, and I was disappointed because it was filled with a lot of the same complaints that people had. But that doesn't take away from the power and meaning of the show. But I'm telling you, he was the one person in the book I had a little trouble writing about in that way, because even the people who worked with him on the radio show, who there are interviews with them on this wonderful database online called the TV Academy, where they have like hours and hours of interviews with all of these TV pioneers. It's the greatest resource ever. And the guy who worked with him basically said everybody who worked with Allen Funt ended up in therapy and having a divorce. So it was just one of those things where there were a lot of people who had complaints about him, some of which are, you know, complaints about him personally being a bully or manipulative, but some of which are about him being a perfectionist. I mean, he was a workaholic, obsessed person who was really determined to turn the show into something. But that's a hard thing to write about. It's funny because it's like the older shows, it was him and also I'm sorry, I'm blanking
Another
on
producer?
major names in the book, Chuck Barris. So the first chapter has a lot to do with Allen Funt. The second chapter has to do with Chuck Barris. And I had the same thing where I was like, a lot of the older people have died. I couldn't reach them. And at a certain point, I wrote a first draft of that chapter, and I was like, I have to meet people who worked with Chuck Barris. So I went online and tried to find people, and I did. It was actually really like fun kind of detective work. And there was this couple that were producers on the show. They married, they met on the show. And she had an Etsy shop So I found her through that. I sent her an email, and they were great interviews. And in contrast to Allen Funt, everybody who worked with Chuck Barris that I talked to, at least, loved him.
You know, that bridges to like the Gong Show. I want to sort of define what we're talking about when we talk about reality shows a little bit, because there's an argument to be made that the Ed Sullivan Show and the Gong Show are almost the same thing, except the Gong Show wasn't trying to say, hey, we've got some really talented people here, so the Ed Sullivan Show, I think, would fall under the heading of variety show.
You're right. It's a talent show. It's not really a reality show. It's in the chapter because it's Chuck Barris and he was a reality guy.
Yeah.
But no, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it's actually, I can't remember the name of the show, but there was a big radio talent show that also somewhat humiliated people, and it was kind of a carry-on of that.
Oh.
I had to define reality in my book, and what I said was, I called it dirty documentary. And basically the way I define it is I say, it's when you take documentary tools, cinema verite idea of just put on a camera, put on a recording device and watch people, and then you cut it with an aggressive, pressured kind of format that speeds it up, pushes people to respond, and turns it into a story and something you can make episodic. And so I run it in the book through 4 lines. And so there's the prank show, which Allen Funt created. There's the game show, which comes from radio, in which basically Chuck Barris picked up all these old radio shows and sexed them up. And then there's the reality soap opera, which goes through An American Family, which I write about in the book, and The Real World, and through the Housewives. And then there's something I call the clip show, which is like America's Funniest Home Videos and Cops, which are just these short cuts. But I agree with you, like just a pure talk show or a sports show or just a variety show isn't really a reality show. It has regular people. I mean, I don't define reality TV as like anything with people reacting spontaneously.
Right. And so is also things like Ancient Aliens, where you have these scientists and pseudo researchers, and I don't know how much they're manipulating.
By the way, you guys are hitting on exactly the parts of the book where I was like, I know the Gong Show isn't a reality show, but I need to include it for these reasons. And the Ancient Aliens and all the Fox shows in the 90s, because it was one of the most fun chapters to write. I have a whole huge section on alien autopsy. And I know there are people reading that going, that's not a reality show. But the thing is, the story of Alien Autopsy and how it helped create Fox, and frankly, how it created the whole TV news problem of things being simultaneously real and fake, seemed very important to me. So I would be writing the book, and there would be things I was interested in, and then I would try to interview everyone involved with them, and Alien Autopsy was one of them.
So... But to me, and again, I'm only interested in this for clarification on what we're talking about may be existentially threatened here by these news reports. There's a difference to me from an Ancient Alien show, which is, who knows? They're using kind of kooky evidence and trying to make something compelling, a compelling narrative out of it. But I don't think they're doing what I was talking about in our intro. My cousin was on Survivor 3 times.
Oh, that's great.
And he would tell me about how they would take things out of context, reshift it around to create characters and storylines that did not exist in the actual event, so that they could create a villain, they could create, a certain impression that they wanted to, and they would take something that was said on Tuesday and a reaction from something else on Friday and make it the reaction to the thing on Tuesday. So they're manipulating reality to create the storylines and impressions they want.
What seasons did he appear on?
His first one, so many have been in Fiji or Fuji now, but it's no secret who he is. His name is Jonathan Penner. They call him Penner on the show. He was on the first season with Parvati, and I can't remember, some of the other stars of that season. But he's done it 3 times because he's a fan favorite. And he loves doing the show. He absolutely adores it. But he would often talk about, they're not making us do or say anything. They're not telling us to do or say anything or, do less than we can on an ability. But they are taking footage from different days and creating scenarios and conversations that didn't actually take
Yeah.
place.
Yeah, there's a continuum from, I mean, I guess documentary to abject bullshit. Like that is just part of this discussion. Like there are shows that do very, there are shows that more closely resemble documentaries, and there are ones where the whole thing is basically what's called soft scripted. And soft scripted is shows that are more like you're talking to the cast and the crew says, you guys should go in the kitchen and have a big fight, and then go onto the porch and throw a cup. Like that's just much closer to improv than it is to
Right.
anything having to do with them having an actual fight. But there's all sorts of stuff in between. And, part of what I write about in the book is the development of these roles of the producers and the cast members and how they interact. It's interesting to say that about Survivor, because although I know there's obviously manipulation in Survivor, the first season, I talked to most of the people who were on the first season. They had plenty of complaints about the stuff that happened, but they did not think that they were misrepresented as far as the events of the show. And I wonder whether it changed as it went on. I know they added some stuff to that show later on. And generally the rules for producers changed a lot as things went on. And sometimes those were economic changes. Like it's a lot easier to tell people to go into the kitchen and fight than it is to hang out with them for 4 months waiting for them to get into a fight.
Yeah.
Like doing it the fake way is cheaper. So that's a lot of the
Yeah,
issue. And there are all sorts of other kinds of cons and hoaxes and stuff like that have to do with it. But the one thing I will say is I talked to a lot of people who were on reality shows, and obviously many people who made them or were behind the camera. And sometimes I'll talk to people about the book and they'll be like, well, everything on those shows is fake anyway. Like, I can't believe people are such suckers and they think it's really happening. And that really bugs people who are on the shows because, it might be misrepresented. It might be taken a little out of context. Certainly the editing might be deceptive, but people actually go through things. Like even on, the book is not about modern shows. It runs from 1947 to 2009.
Yeah.
But I just wrote this big investigative piece about Love is Blind. I don't know if you know the show where the people, are divided by a wall and then they get married on the show.
Right.
And I talked to these people who have enormous complaints about the show. But did they fall in love and get married? They actually did. It's not all scripted and it's not all made up.
What were, because you revealed a lot of stuff about that, where NDAs, the way they were treated was not the best experience for a lot of them. They can't complain about stuff. They're more like game show contestants. They're not actors in a show. They're just shoved in there. And what was the biggest problem for the people on that show?
On Love is Blind, well, the great thing about writing the book was everybody's NDAs had expired. So they could tell me various stories about manipulation and cruelty and joy, without having to worry about breaking an NDA. The people on Love is Blind, like the people on all modern shows, have to sign these just brutal non-disclosure agreements that mean that it's not just that they can't spoil the show or even talk about abuse. They can't talk about anything without the producers letting them do it. So that was a different kind of piece. That was like an investigative piece about a bunch of legal stuff. And there are a handful of people from that show who are working to change the labor role of people in reality television. And like you're saying, they're like people on game shows. There's a category in Hollywood that's called, that I didn't know about while I was writing the book, because the book is not that much about the legal thing for performers. It's more about the attempt to unionize for producers. But on there's this more recent thing, and so I learned that it's called a bona fide amateur is the category. So a bona fide amateur is somebody who doesn't qualify as, a scripted performer like in SAG, but also doesn't qualify as like a professional non-scripted performer like a news host or a talk show host or all of those kinds of things. So it's a little carve out for people who have no rights whatsoever, can get paid nothing, and you can do anything you want to them and they can't talk about it. So in my personal opinion, that should probably change, because that seems wrong. And I think the reason it hasn't changed is because people have contempt for reality television. They have contempt for people who go on reality television. They have contempt for people who make it. And I understand where some of that comes from, but I think it blinds people to the actual ethical problem. and the fact that there are real victims of this, but in a more voyeuristic way, aside from the fact that I think people should have legal and labor rights and not be paid terribly and then forced to work a lot. I also want to know how the shows are made. Like, I'm just nosy. So I want the NDAs to go away, in part so people who are fans of these shows can understand the reality of how they're made. And that's part of what I was trying to do in this book, is sort of tell the stories of who invented these things. And it's not really like a book that's like, yay, reality, or a denunciation of it, but trying to kind of explain where did it come from and how did they make it.
Do you know, from talking to producers of all kinds of shows, I've always kind of wondered if there's a different job or a different satisfaction or difficulty in the job of producing a reality show that is intended to be, for lack of a better word, inspirational, versus producing one that is intended at its best to be kind of prurient. So the difference between perhaps a Queer Eye and Big Brother kind of thing.
Yeah, there definitely is, and it's one of the difficulties of talking about this at all, right? Like, not all scripted shows are the same, and not all reality shows are the same. Right. They have different intents, they have different methods. I asked every producer and cameraman and editor. I mean, I talked to a lot of different people on these shows, what line they wouldn't cross. I asked them all, like, what kind of show do you love to make, and what kind of show won't you make? Like, is there anything that crosses your line? And a lot of people love making things that are warm and inspirational, but I thought that the line they wouldn't cross would be more like torture shows or prank shows. And so many people said dating shows. Like, there's one guy who was like, I love doing shark shows where people cry and are frightened, and it's really authentic emotion. Like, that's part of why people get involved, is they like that. He's like, dating shows crossed a line for him because he felt like it messed with, it's like young drunk girls who genuinely want to fall in love and are easy to manipulate, and it felt cruel. And this guy I was talking to, by the way, is not like a major feminist or anything, but He felt like the shows were misogynist and it just crossed a line for him. But I always think that question is interesting because, I mean, first of all, many people in many different careers have ethical questions about their jobs or things they won't cross. But reality, when you're working on one of these sets, it's kind of a intense, humid bubble of it, just like a different set of what's acceptable. So I think the dirtiest chapter in the book in a lot of ways is about The Bachelor, because that's a show that has very different ethics than something like Queer Eye, or there are a lot of, or Survivor for that matter. The job is to fuck with people's heads and get them to fall in love and then have a nervous breakdown and be heartbroken in public.
Well, you know what? It's weird because I wanted to check out The Golden Bachelor or Bachelorette, whichever one ran, because I hadn't watched one of those shows in a really long time. And the fact that you have one woman or one guy and 30 people that I'm going to try and make you fall in love with, and that we're going to whittle it down to the final 3 that you may want to sleep with, be with, whatever, is already mind-blowing to me. It's just such a...
It's so funny because it's not mind-blowing to, like, there's so many young women who I talk to who it's like their favorite show and it's just par for the course. When the show started, people found that shocking. I mean, but when Survivor started, people thought that show was going to destroy the world because they were eating bugs. Hey, Jason, would you go on Survivor?
I don't think I'd be good at it. Would I go? I've thought about it. I actually have thought about it. At my age, I don't know that I'd be very good either in the camp or at the challenges. But I don't think I'd be good at knowing someone was manipulating me. I am very gullible. So when someone seems to be, speaking earnestly to me, I tend to go, oh, okay. So we have that connection now, and that must be a real thing. I think I'm too gullible, and I would have to play a role of some kind, some sort of avatar, in order to do the kind of social manipulation that you need to do in order to maneuver through that game. I don't think I'd be very good at it. But by the same token,
I'm like you. I'm first of all credulous, and I trust people, and I have no poker face.
Yeah.
So it would be particularly bad.
But I have advocated that my older son would be great on it. He loves it. He knows the show backwards, and other than he's not good when he's not fed.
Yes, that is a particular downside.
Yeah.
The first season
Yeah.
of the show, which I wrote about, people were actively starving, and I think I heard that on later seasons they realized that having people be so starving that they literally are falling apart and sleeping all the time is not good television.
Not good.
So
Do
they
they
changed
know
that.
all the research about, like with the survivors and stuff? What are the worst? Have there been really bad tragedies that have gone on that have been covered up?
Well, my cousin almost lost his leg.
But that must be not a one-off. That's got to be when you're out there, you hurt yourself.
Yeah.
That's a very. There have definitely been incidents. I don't know that they were covered up. That's a very professional show, and unless I've been completely conned, my sense is that when stuff happens, they have medical help around.
Well, not just on that show, but there's so many.
And somebody fell in a fire during the second season or the third season.
Yeah,
and
really?
and Mark Burnett's big comment about it was he said, if that guy had stopped filming, I would have fired him. So it was a whole episode about the guy falling in the fire, and people had various feelings about that. But that's interesting about your cousin. There's shadiness, just not putting everything up front, and then there's mental illness and that kind of harm. And I definitely think that they cast people on shows deliberately, especially on some of the more drama prone, like on Big Brother. I talked to a woman who was on the first season of the show who's pretty sure, they have them go through therapy and get tested, and there's a certain kind of crazy that they're looking for to cast, because it's somebody who is going to lose it and make for powerful television, but who's not enough aware of their own problems that they can protect themselves from it. I mean, it's kind of baked into the casting for the show. And there's all sorts of separate subjects about this, but one of them is that there actually are what's it called? There are therapists who work on the show, and their job is to work for the producers, but the cast members are often experiencing therapy for the first time. And I just don't understand how any of this can be legal. If you're curious about any of this, there's a show called Unreal that's a scripted show by Sarah Gertrude Shapiro, who was a producer, a very repentant producer from The Bachelor. And it's the one scripted show that's really like a behind the scenes show about the making of a show like The Bachelor. And one of the major characters in it is this therapist who just learns everything about the girls and then goes to the producers and says, this is a good time for you to push her about her anorexia in high school.
Wow.
And the thing is, that stuff is not exaggerated. Like, that is genuinely what goes on, especially on the shadier of the shows. And I do think, and then there's also like drinking. Some of this has changed over time. I mean, there's been clamps downs because, there's a larger discussion in Hollywood about abuse, all that kind of stuff that I think has shifted. There are discussions about diversity on the shows that have changed. A group of the Black survivors all organized and cut an agreement with CBS. So there's been like a lot of discussions about like the ethics and the makeup of the show. But the basic task of the producers is to squeeze people until they crack on certain shows. And that's just the truth. This is not on every show. Like, and this is, again, the difficulty. Like, but I have to say, I was so excited when I got to the chapter where I was going to write about Project Runway and Queer Eye, which are two shows that I have enormous fondness for. Like, I was like, oh, these will be these sweet pro-gay shows. And then I had this realization that Project Runway, the origins of the show was that Harvey Weinstein wanted to make a show with models in it. Like that not that was the outcome,
but nevertheless,
but it's just like every show, even shows that I found sort of punk rock and kind of powerful and that showed the sort of things you couldn't get on scripted TV. It's not like there's anything that's clean of emotional manipulation, but that's, I think, part of why people watch also. I think the discomfort people felt with like Candid Camera, it's not like it made people not watch it. I think they got something out of that feeling of collusion and discomfort and the feeling that you got to see something taboo that you didn't get to see anywhere else.
I want to ask you about one very specific show, and it's a fairly recent one, just to see if you even think it falls in the category of reality. Were you able to watch Jury Duty?
Yes, I did watch Jury Duty, which is, I don't know if you read the section in the book that's about the Joe Schmo show. Do you
No.
guys know what the Joe Schmo show is?
Well, I do, but
So
why don't you?
Jury Duty is basically a remake of exactly the same thing that went on with the Joe Schmo show. And I talked to most people who were involved with the Joe Schmo show. So the Joe Schmo show came out in, I think it was like 2003 or something like that. It was after the big turn of the century reality boom. And it was the first show that was like a reality show that was a parody of reality shows. So it was kind of an inside response. It was made by a guy who worked at Big Brother. And the idea of the show was they were like, what if we make a show that's a reality show and kind of a prank show, but the goal is to show somebody being kind and generous rather than somebody being a venal sadistic
Right,
monster like was
right.
winning a lot of the shows, the competitive shows. So what they did is they created a fake reality show that was called Lap of Luxury, that was set in a big house. And everybody in that house was an actor except for one guy.
Uh-huh.
And that one guy was the Schmo, the Joe Schmo.
Right.
And it was sort of a parody of all these different shows. So all the characters that the actors played were parodies of other reality characters. Like there was a guy who was like Puck on The Real World, and there were, this was on Spike, which was a TV channel for guys. So it had a lot of like girls in bikinis and stuff like that. And there was a character based on Rudy from Survivor. So this one guy, they cast this very sweet guy on the show, and he goes in and he thinks he's on a reality show, but he doesn't realize it's a prank show where he's the only pranked person. And the making of the show was really fascinating, and it drove everybody almost into a nervous breakdown who was making it, because the problem with casting an empathetic person at the center of a show like this is he starts to develop loyalty and feelings toward these fake characters around him. And so he started feeling protective of the older guy. And if there was like a gay character that was like a stereotypical character and people would make fun of him, and he would defend that guy. And he started getting a crush on Kristen Wiig, who was in the show. Kristen Wiig was playing the psychiatrist on the show. So anyway, the whole thing almost broke down. And when I talked to people about the show, they felt a lot of morally complex things about it, including one of the major guys in the show who was like, yeah, I regret having done it. It was really painful. So then they make this new show, which is basically the same thing, right?
Yeah,
like Jury Duty. The only difference is they were a little careful on Jury Duty. Like it's about jury duty. It's not, it's like a documentary about jury duty. So it's not like so intimate, like you're living in a house and competing for money and stuff. And I think they kind of went out of their way not to have him fall in love with people. Which I think
Although they made him
not a lot there to
they did
I don't know. I guess you could fall in love with that actor.
Yeah, right. With Marsden.
And they did make him responsible for the woman who kept falling asleep.
Yeah, right.
It was it was brilliant. It was brilliant.
Anyway, it was a brilliant show. It was a brilliantly made show. It was a very funny show. But I wrote a book about these shows, and I like some of these shows, but there's a problem of like writing about the sausage factory thing. And I have a real distaste for, I just don't like prank shows. And so when I watched that show, I was like, oh my God, nobody even remembers that they made the Joe Schmo show. Right. Now they're making another show. Everybody's acting like it's this big breakthrough. And sure enough, they're reviving the Joe Schmo show.
The argument that our research was showing us is that the argument that it's dying is because the industry, the producers in the industry are being existentially challenged because they're being given less time, less resources, less money to make these things. And so how can you possibly do something that is creative and inventive or has quality or that you can build in a sustained way? So it feels like they're asking reality shows to deliver on impossible budgets. And of course, once a producer does, the networks go, well, see, obviously it can be done, and so they continue to do it. But
it's funny because there's some shows that are really like shiny and beautiful, like in The Amazing Race or Survivor for that matter, where they're visually very powerful, and they sort of invented all these new aesthetic things that people use on TV were created by reality TV people. Those are expensive, but I think that there are shows that cost almost nothing that people do want to watch. The biggest change, of course, is that not only are there so many people who've been on reality television, but the nature of fame has changed. Like when these shows were coming out, there were famous people and unfamous people, and then there was this mysterious set of weirdos who were unfamous but had suddenly become famous. So everyone was like, why do you think you're so great? You should not be famous. And then they were very angry. But now everybody is a little bit famous online, and that's just completely changed the calculation.
Absolutely.
And people are much more I don't know, comfortable, pathological about being out in public. Like it sort of depends how you see it. But you know, the thing that sells a reality show, or I'm sure a shocking, violent kind of new spectacle, bad press. You know, like Mike Darnell is, you know, absolutely shameless and straight up about this. He's like, we didn't want to make a show that people thought was a good show. We wanted to make a show that every, you know, outraged liberal and feminist and a lot of people on the right also would all be like, this is garbage and it's destroying the world. Because then you get a lot of press that says this is garbage and it's destroying the world.
You can't be describing when animals attack. 3.
Well, I remember Mike Darnell at one point was, the pushback was he wanted to take a real jet airliner and do a live crash into the desert with dummies in it, cameras everywhere, so everybody could see what it would like to be in a plane crash. That was the reality show that he tried to get. And there was pushback, but like you said, the amount of publicity for the plane crash thing was insane. It was mind-blowing.
But we all know that no one can turn away from a train wreck. We can't do it. So, you know, you just don't know.
You know something?
I mean, all of those shows were based on exactly that premise.
Yeah.
You can't turn away, and it was all using that was using like already done footage, just clipped together, taking out
and in his defense,
parts.
You can't turn away on That's Incredible from the guy who says he's catching bullets in his teeth. You can't turn away. So,
and I actually didn't realize how many people got seriously injured on That's Incredible.
Oh yeah,
Like until I started research, I was like, oh my gosh, like a guy burned his hand off. He was going through a tunnel. Like they had to put that don't try that on television thing because of
that was my when we talked to
which person was this?
When we talked to Woody Frazier, he said the first, and then we're gonna have to run, but we talked to Woody Frazier and he said what happened was he found a guy who could swallow coins and then regurgitate them in the order that you called for. Like you'd say, okay, do the nickel, dime, quarter, dime, nickel. And so he's taping it, and the woman from the network, Legal, goes, there's no friggin' way you're running a guy swallowing coins and regurgitating them. So Woody said, I came up with the famous, don't try this at home. And because of that, she said that allowed the floodgates to open for do not try this at home, was all they needed for a legal disclaimer.
And an industry is born.
The floodgates open.
Exactly.
Yeah, so, well, we look forward to the next book, but this book is called Cue the Sun. And it's
really fun. It's really fun.
It's from the beginning of radio stunts, which is fascinating to me. Allen Funt on radio through The Apprentice, and then now we're going to do your next book. I guess starts with influencers and all. We'll see where it goes, right? No, it's all right. It's all.
I'm going to find something very sweet, very elegant to write about for the next.
Another Pulitzer.
She's going to review every episode of Anne with an E, very slowly.
How many did your parents go insane about the Pulitzer? I mean, that must have been huge.
Yeah, my dad was very, very excited.
That's huge. I'm proud of you, and I just met you. So
I was very shocked. I mean, there's no downside to winning. That's
none. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Well, congratulations, Emily Nussbaum. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. It was great meeting you guys. Thanks for inviting me.
I can't tell if she thinks reality shows are dying or not. I don't think she does think that.
I don't think we know. Like you had pointed out, a lot of television is going down the tube. You know, I had in front of me before the streaming networks how much money they're losing because of all the content that they have to produce. Something's going to shake out, you know. And I think my guess, being nobody in the entertainment business and not being a prognosticator that's successfully navigated a lot, I do think that the Mr. Beasts of the world are going to eventually, when anybody can pitch, like we said, we had to go in and pitch Mike Darnell. You don't have to pitch anymore. You just have to start doing it.
You just do your thing.
Do your thing.
Yeah.
So if there's something out there, what did you joke about? You come up with, the Guess That's Staying or whatever. Who knows what's going to be the next thing that takes off? Would you have thought eating hot wings and talking about answering questions would have been a show that you sold?
I also would have said, no one's going to go for this.
You're
not going to get Scarlett Johansson to come on.
And it just sold for millions and millions of dollars because they're going to do it live on Amazon now. Yeah. Who would have known that that's what people want to watch? So you don't know where people, unboxing. If you had told me a kid's going to make $30 million opening boxes of toys. There's no way.
Right.
You don't have to get to an executive anymore to say okay. You just have to have the numbers.
You bet.
So I think it's going to change. I think it's going to shake out in a different way.
But I also,
You're always going to have the survivors. There's always certain formats that just work and people like doing it. But I also don't know, Jason. TV's aging out.
Yeah.
Very shortly, the hit show, when you were Seinfeld, I think your finale was 75 million people, 78 million people. MASH was 100 million people.
Right.
Now big shows are 3 million people, 1.5 million.
Yeah.
Network news is getting 1 million people, 2 million people.
Yeah.
It's so fragmented now that eventually that's going to disappear because you can't pay an anchor on ABC or wherever $14 million to reach nobody. So it's going to kind of shift to streaming in a different way.
Yeah.
Right?
I feel that.
Yeah.
I got you. Yeah, it's interesting. I will say this about if the streamers are going to go down. I do have a big movie coming out on Netflix in March, so can we hold on to Netflix?
Oh, huge! Well,
yeah.
but those big movies on those streamers are always going to make money. It's how the streamers make money.
Yeah, it's The Electric State, starring Millie Bobby Brown and Chris Pratt and
Russo brothers.
Tiny role.
Will they
Jason
come on, by the
Alexander.
way, the Russo brothers?
Onto this show?
Yeah, no, probably
Why?
not. Okay,
Why would
yeah,
they do
you
Would you?
And
If
that's
you
what
were-
I like.
If you
That's-
were a Russo brother,
That's
would
what I
you?
like John Sally. It's that player attitude of I'm going to go out and conquer no matter what. I go to you. Will they come on?
Absolutely.
No, why would they? Why would
I have a bigger question.
Okay.
Will they come on this show? I'll get rid of that question to go, will they use me in another film? That's a better
Okay,
question.
all right. Well, they used you in that one. That's pretty cool.
They were great. They were
By the way,
great.
do you always have to say all three names Millie Bobby Brown?
Well, she just got married. I wonder if it's
Millie
if
Bobby Brown
she's-
Bon Jovi.
If it's changed it. I don't know if that's.
I don't know either.
Brown
But
is
Millie
still
Bobby
a
Brown,
thing.
it's one of those, usually when you get bigger, you go to one name. You don't expand. Right?
MBB. She's just MBB. from this
MBB. I
point.
mean, shit, seriously. Come on. Millie Bobby
I
Brown.
don't know.
Hey, is Millie Bobby Brown here? Millie Bobby Brown.
It's a perfect Bing Crosby name.
Millie
isn't it?
Bobby Brown. Millie Bobby Brown. Okay.
Mr. Guggenheim, welcome. Do you have anything for us from our conversation? And then I'll play a little game with you and Peter.
I had so much. I enjoyed the trailer the other day. They just released the trailer.
Yeah, it's a good trailer for the movie. Yep, Electric State.
Were you in it? Because do we even
I am not
know
in
what
that
your
trailer.
role-
No, I'm barely in the movie. I am in the first. If you want to go page count, I'm in the first 14 pages of 128 pages.
More importantly, did you get a trailer?
I got a trailer.
Okay,
yeah,
all right. Nice.
yeah. And I learned how to do mocap. I learned things.
motion capture.
Yes. Yeah.
I saw you. I love Jason. He is my brother, and we've been close for a long time. And whenever he goes on vacation in Hawaii, whatever, there's always the topless picture. They always take.
Yeah.
And what's the picture? I see Jason. He's like, I'm in New York, Petey. I'll call you Tuesday. I see him looking like a water balloon.
Yeah.
They got a motion capture green suit with balls.
Yeah. It's the,
on the street in New York,
Yeah.
walking around.
Not in New York. No, I was in
Oh, was-
Atlanta. I was in the
in
studio.
Atlanta. But it was
no, I was
no,
on,
you were out
no,
the
I was
street.
in a
Yeah,
little
you-
town. a
They had
little
you
town.
on the
Yeah,
street
yeah,
looking
yeah,
like you're going
yeah.
to the mall
Yeah.
with balls all over.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
a great shot.
And a headband.
And a headband, yeah.
Which is always good on a bald guy.
What was the headband for?
Because they have to capture the head movements too, so it
Oh, all right.
follows,
Okay,
tracks
all
the
right.
head. Yes,
There you
David.
go. Yes. Okay. Well, just to clear something up earlier, she was saying that there was a Star Trek veteran who was into the paranormal. Jason, you did get it correctly. It was Jonathan Frakes, who hosted season 2 onwards of Beyond Belief, Fact or Fiction.
Well, there you go.
There you go. He also did hosted a short-lived show named The Paranormal Borderline.
It's always the number 2 guy. Leonard Nimoy did one of those sci-fi is it possible shows kind of thing too. So,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a lot there. Now here I had actually some interesting reality TV trivia for you. We could do briefly. What was the most popular episode of reality TV ever?
Oh Jesus.
I'll give you a hint. There was 51.7 million viewers.
Oh, for God's sakes! When Geraldo opened Al Capone's safe. Is that possible?
God, it's got to
What
be
could
the
it be?
finale of something where everybody watched to see how it would end. So what was
Yes.
a big show where everybody would have
What
watched?
was the big cultural phenomenon reality show? with
Was
the
it somebody winning a big amount of money that they all
Yes, and
watched
he
for?
would later go to jail for it.
Oh, was it the Survivor?
Richard Hatch?
that Richard Hatch?
Richard
won?
Hatch?
Right. Survivor season 1.
Richard Hatch. There you go.
51.7
Oh,
million,
yeah,
and
look at
they've
that.
not
Thank you. Thank
repeated
you.
that.
Thank you.
And can you guess what was the most popular reality show in 2024 with 20.9 million viewers?
I'm guessing it's The Bachelorette or The Bachelor.
So, and I'm guessing is America's Got Talent? I know how Howie Mandel's that show still does big
I don't know
numbers.
if that qualifies
No,
as a
Yeah, I don't know if
reality.
that's considered.
yeah, very good guesses. It was apparently Love is Blind.
Oh, it is Love is Blind.
Which is the show that she said had all the issues.
yeah,
Yeah, okay.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And just to give us a little bit of comparison, what was the highest rated TV event in history?
In history?
Yes.
Well, I would imagine it was well, I was going to say the landing on the moon for the first time, but
I know some of them was like the Nixon
125
resignation.
to 150 million.
What was it? It's
viewers.
150 million views, huh?
Yes.
I know Nixon resignation was huge. I know there was a
ending of
couple things
Roots,
that were
Roots, the finale. Could it be?
It was a news event.
news.
Well,
event.
that's why I'm thinking Neil Armstrong stepping out on Mars.
Kennedy funeral.
Jason is correct.
Mars.
Landing.
Landing on Mars, which we didn't do yet.
Moon,
I'm
landing on
kidding.
the moon. Yeah,
Landing on
Wow,
Mars.
it's the
Yeah.
biggest. The biggest.
Yes.
Yeah, I would think so. But,
Neither
you know,
actually happened. So.
and you know
there
my
go.
grandmother's great
You
story
said
on that.
neither happened.
Yeah. My cousin Jeffrey was watching it with the little portable television past his bedtime. My grandmother Hilda caught him and said, "Jeffrey, turn it off." And he said, "Grandma, they're about to walk on the moon." And my grandmother went, "They'll walk on the moon tomorrow."
There you go. There you go.
It's a true story. All right, you want to play a little game?
And by the way, we haven't been back, so which is
That's right. Wow,
grandmother's
yeah.
wrong.
Right. So these is a game similar to ones we played before. Some of these are actual reality shows. Some of them are complete.
All right, here we go.
made
You
up.
love doing that. Okay.
You ready? Real or fake? I Want to Marry Harry. Female contestants vie in contests to ostensibly marry Prince Harry. It's actually
That's real. That's a real show.
David?
No.
That's a real show. I Want to Marry Harry. And it was huge, by the way. The Tank.
Who won?
Nobody. The Tank, a Japanese show in which contestants play. They are sealed in a sensory deprivation tank to see who is the last
Oh,
to
I think
crack.
that's real too. I think I read about the guy who won. I think. Go ahead. Unless I'm not.
No.
So-
How do you film that? No.
I made that up.
Sensory-
That's completely
No, but there
bullshit.
was a guy. There was a sensory deprivation guy. Lived in like an apartment or something. For a
That's
long
not
time.
sensory deprivation.
Okay.
That's isolation. That's a
Okay, all
different
right,
thing. Okay, this
No,
show.
Fine.
Would you shoot? Fantasy courses and scenarios challenge contestants to navigate unusual visual setups and live confrontations and only shoot the bad guys. So it's like, walking through a maze and there are scenarios and there's pop-ups.
Yeah, I'll
and
say yes.
Good idea, but no.
I made it up. It's total bullshit.
I'm writing all these down because we're going to be doing them.
Best funeral ever, in which loved ones hand over the remains of the deceased and allow elaborate, fun-filled funerals to be created for them, like
That's gotta be
rolling
real.
a bowler's casket down the
That's
lane
gotta
for
be
one
real.
last
That's got to
strike.
be real. I would do that. If I would be on that show in a minute.
Yes.
It's absolutely true. Best
That is
funeral
as good
ever.
as it goes. Oh my God.
60 days. A contestant is given a false name and background, then thrown into a general prison population. If they make it through 60 days without revealing themselves or tapping out, they win.
I don't think that's happening because you can't co-opt the other prisoners to play a long night.
Insurance wouldn't cover it. No.
I made it up.
Yeah,
It's
you
totally
can't,
false.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you,
for
sir.
playing. No, thank
what a great
you.
pleasure.
Yeah, it's always fun.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Emily Nussbaum. And
Drive safely. I don't know why I said that.
right. Why would we
You
sign
can never
off
go
with
wrong with
anything
drive
other than
safely.
listen to our damn show?
Can you ever go and chew? Chew well.
Yeah. Yeah, swallow. Chew before you swallow.